Thank you for letting me share with you some of my prophetic insights that are part of my multitasking ministries. This same message will be preached from the pulpit to my small congregation on Sunday, where I serve as a part-time pastor. My role, however, as the part-time minister for ministries across generations for the General Church in the United States and Canada, is what led your pastor to reach out to me. Ministries across generations is a part of Disciples Home Missions. It is a leader in the major paradigm shift and the best practices of working with our children, our youth, young adults, families, and well, a little bit of everyone. Our goal is not to create these amazing youth ministries or children's ministries, but instead something a little different. The best ministries with youth, children, and families. Now, some of you may think that that's the same thing, but the slight change in the wording makes a very big difference if you think faithfully about it. The word that most people do not see at first, but is a crucial word, is the word with. How do we grow with each other in our faith? We intergenerate. Or in other words, we intentionally generate across generational lines with daily faith in our homes that connects to our churches and connects to our world for life. We seek to engage in relationships that allow us to follow Jesus Christ for life and not just one stage of our life. We seek to help people understand that faith is not something that just happens on Sunday mornings or evenings, but something that happens and that we must engage in every day at all ages and stages. So if you're listening to this, then at some point there is someone who introduced you to your Christian faith. You can think of the family and the friends and the ministers who inspired, led, and most importantly, loved you. You can think of the communities that surrounded you to show you God's love, and especially when you needed it in the most difficult times. And those one or two people who were really deep examples of your faith. All of these people and these experiences are sacred gifts of the love of God. Yet, many people do not receive these sacred gifts. We live in a world that says, look what I did for you, instead of a world that says, look what I did with you. And this lack of engaging intentionally across age lines with one another, both within our homes and our churches, have left many people with a very shallow faith that does not actually have enough support when real life comes and the need for real deep love also comes. Instead, people have left their faith. They leave God and they leave the church. Think about it. If you have a youth group of just 20 people, it is estimated that only 2 or 3 of those youth will remain faithful into adulthood. Now, there are many reasons for this reality, and I want to give you a few to think about. Churches often say, what can we do to get them to come? Instead, we should go to them. What can we do to show them God's love every day? How can we build with them an authentic relationship? One with a different person of a different age and their family. How can we allow space to share with them and allow them to then share back with us? How do we merge our faith experiences? How do we engage and not just entertain? Another example to think about is the excuses just don't add up. Literally. Churches often think, I can give the youth program an amazing curriculum, or we will hire a youth minister and that will solve all of these problems. So we have chosen to hire out to get the job of daily faith and lifelong faith done. But studies show that young people, all people, need multiple people at multiple life stages to actually help guide them. They do not need to be seen as a separate part of the church that needs to be fixed or entertained. Instead, especially with our young people and our elderliest of elders, those are often the most vulnerable. They are often the ones who are needed to blah, blah. We're going to pause there and we're going to go back. This is me going back. The excuses don't add up, literally. Churches often think, if we buy a curriculum or hire a youth minister, these will solve all of our problems with youth and children's programs. Churches choose to hire out to get the faith job done. But young people need multiple people at multiple life stages to actually help guide them into adulthood and through adulthood. They do not need to be seen as a separate part of the church that needs to be fixed or entertained. In fact, they are the most vulnerable, along with the most aging. And the most vulnerable and the most important, both on both ends of the generational spectrum, need the most variety of ways to learn, engage, and be included in God's story daily. Yet often those working with the least of these get paid the least, know the least, and are treated as the least. I know many churches who pay someone for 2 to 4 years, and then that person is left. And they often leave due to being underappreciated or underpaid. And the young people who need 5 or 7 adults have lost the 1 or 2 people who were willing to be there for him or her. Or many churches have a solo pastor like myself who see that pastor first as the primary pastor for adults. Thus, once again, implicitly teaching our children and youth and others that they are second-class citizens that are really not a part of the current church. And so many people did not stay around for tomorrow. The church was unable to do the hard work to really engage with one another. I mean, we invite them to come to us, but we don't go to them. And even if they come in, many of them now don't even trust that there is something real to offer. It just looks good. Plus, many of us have forgotten and do not know how to be faithful beyond Sundays, to really include God in the everyday. And so we have forgotten that one of our primary calls as the family of God in both small and big ways is to pass on and help people understand faith together across all generations. My colleague, Jason Santos, says, I hate to say it because I share in the blame, but we have failed our young people and the church at large by not truly cultivating an intergenerational community of faith where they knew they belonged. This became even more apparent when the world was forced a year ago to go digital. Now, anyone I knew who had worked with those under 35 was already able to go digital. But it was amazing how many of those in our churches had not tapped into the resources of curated material in a digital world. And yet this is where the younger generations live, engage, and even connect. These are also the tools that can help many in our older generations engage and continue connect when they are physically not able to move as easily. And so I spent the first 2 months of this pandemic reaching out to people, letting them know that we have this website that has many resources for such a time as this. It includes ways to be faithful in worship at home and ways to respond faithfully in both virtual space and home space. It was all there. It was just ready. It's really just one click away. But most people had no idea where to look or what to do. There were so many also who were so scared to admit and grieve that they had no idea how to lead, be, and seek God in every day. We have treated our churches like gas stations. We believe that we go and should be filled up. We forget that that is also the place where we should go and be willing to empty what is holding us back. So we must grieve our failures. We must grieve that we have been more self-focused than community-focused. We must grieve that we have not shared and taught and embraced the faith that sustains us with others. We haven't let younger voices teach us, and we haven't opened doors to allow our voices and elderly voices to respond back. And we have let the excuses run rampant because we have so many of them. And this pattern of turning away from God and turning away from each other is one that repeats again and again in the biblical stories. But the true damage is that we have turned away from those who need God most. And they have left. Not because they did not have the right ministers, not because they did not have the right curriculum or even the right type of music. What they didn't have was an intergenerational community that loves them and allowed them to be loved in return. They didn't have people willing to show up for them when those people weren't being paid. They may have had enough money or they may not have, but people sometimes would send them on mission trips and they didn't have others actually joining them in these journeys. They didn't have daily interactions. They didn't leave the church. They never really actually experienced the church as the holy, sacred people of God. And that, strangely enough, is good news. That means while there is much work to do, there is a lot of love to live into. And so we have to start asking, how do we engage in the best practices together? Well, we practice. Our vision for ministries across generations includes the following findings. We ask people to engage in sacred space and ritual, sacred story, sacred conversation and language, sacred meals, and sacred steps and mission. Now, there are many tools and ways in which to engage in these as the entire body of Christ. And that is much more than actually just one message or sermon. It is a lifelong, daily experience of big and little faith moments. And yet I do have to name once again that today's message is not an easy one for many to hear. It means we have failed our faith, our community, and our God. And even as my little church works through the grieving and mourning realities of the last year, we continue to also have to grieve the realities we already knew, but became more apparent during the pandemic and this strange time. And the emotions of that grief are real. These truths can make many angry, many defensive, and many more just want to live into denial. or not actually share in the ongoing need and responsibilities. And I understand those frustrations and emotions. But I also understand that once we allow ourselves the time to accept the hurt, it is only then that we can begin to be accountable and then active in changing from our selfish faith endeavors to a new way, a resurrected way, a loving Jesus way of being love in the world for all of God's people, love in the world for all those who don't know that there is a God who loves them through Jesus Christ, love in the world because we do know someone who loved us even in our failures and our grief. We know someone who loved us. And so we take action to love others across all age, stage, and life lines. Amen.